Welcome back to Global Card Collectors. It's another episode with probably our most regular guest, our most consistent guest in Justin. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me back. Always like coming on, always like talking to you and John when he's on too about the hobbies. So yeah, man, I'm glad to be a regular guest.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your outfit and why you're wearing the Florida Gators?
Florida Gators.
Right?
So every time I'm on here, I feel like I've told a different part of my sports fandom story. I've worn my Lions gear because I grew up in Michigan, and pro sports, I root for Michigan. My dad is an Ohio State grad, so I grew up with Ohio State football. So I'm an Ohio State fan in college football. I went to graduate school at the University of Florida years back. And I wasn't basically willing to – I root for the Gators as a side team in football, but because it was so ingrained in me to be a Buckeye fan, I'm actually an Ohio State football fan, even though I went to the University of Florida. But basketball, Ohio State basketball is not much of a thing. I didn't grow up with that. It was just for my dad. It was all about Ohio State football. So when I went to UF, it was like, okay, I can kind of adopt this part of my school sports scene. So I went to a lot of basketball games when I was there. I was there during the tail end of the Billy Donovan era. So saw some pretty good teams. We made an Elite Eight run when I was there one year with Chris Chioza and some of those guys. So today's the first day of March Madness, which is why I'm here sitting around at home in the middle of the day. Took the day off for it, as I have every year for 28 years now between school and work.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a cool thing. My mom let me start when I was a kid because she's actually a Kentucky fan. She grew up in Kentucky, so she's a big college basketball fan too. So yeah, that's the Gator gear because it's March Madness time, and Gators got a shot this year. We're a 1 seed, and yeah, I'm hopeful about our chances to make a run.
Yeah, so I guess the episode will air a little bit later than opening day, so people will probably already know if the Gators are still alive or not.
Yeah,
the whole tournament might have finished by then too.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's only less than a month long. So yeah, by the time this airs, we'll probably know. So hopefully it's good news, but I don't know. Tough to say in March, man. Anything can happen.
That's right. Yeah, well, fingers crossed for you, man. So I wanted to start the episode by asking you, since you've been to a lot of big card shows, I guess my first question for you is, what's your strategy going into them? So I've been to like a couple of, I'd say mid-sized ones. They're good big card shows. Like they fill an entire gym, and not a small gym, a decent sized one. So you'd have maybe 100 to 150 vendors. It's probably about as big as I've gone. And it's easy enough to get around and look at other people's stuff and see it, because 150 is manageable, There are the Pokemon area in the past. I was just like, no, I don't want Pokemon cards. So there was 30% of the cards gone already. I don't even have to look at them. But now I feel like I'm going to a show in Germany. Well, John and I are going. In fact, John, if you've seen other episodes, back and I are going. So we've got a big crew going down there and all have been on Global Card Collectors. We're going to be meeting some of the guests that have been on the show too. And it's the biggest. Yeah, it's going to be great. I think that's the part that I'm looking forward to the most. But it's the biggest show in Europe. It's in Dusseldorf in Germany. And they say there's going to be, I think, between 500 and 600 tables. Wow. So how to navigate that and make the most of it is really something that I need to kind of get my head around. Obviously, it's going to be the first day. They'll have a trade night on the first evening of the show, and then the Sunday. So it's a Saturday-Sunday event at the beginning of July this year, so not too far off. So you've been to the National. You've been to, I think, is it the Chicago?
Yeah, the Chicago Sports Spectacular.
Spectacular.
Which is, yeah, probably slightly bigger. Probably pretty close to on par with the show you're describing in Germany. I think maybe slightly bigger, but that one's kind of analogous in terms of size, the Chicago one.
Mm-hmm. Good. So you've had lots of experience with them, and you've been to the Chicago one a few times, I assume, from memory.
3 times, yeah. I've been to that one 3 times, and I went to the National last year. So yeah, with the strategies I have, most of it's been kind of like, learning from the mistakes I make at each previous show and then kind of going in. And I think that one thing that I would definitely suggest is go in with a list of cards you're looking for that you plan to very loosely stick to. And what I mean by that is, so I made the mistake a couple years ago of going into the Chicago Sports Spectacular saying, I will purchase one of these 3 cards. Well, 2 of them weren't there, and the copy of the one that was not a copy that I liked very much, but that was my list. I was going to stick to that. So I ended up buying this card I didn't really like. Long story short, I ended up selling it, taking a bit of a loss, but then rebuying the card and getting a great deal on one I did like. So it ends up the card I have in my collection now, all told, it's like, okay, I'm all right with what I ended up paying for that card in totality, based on what I was able to get back off the one I bought that I didn't want. But it was a hassle, it was a headache, and it was really because I went in thinking a bit too rigidly about what I needed to get and put a lot of pressure on myself. With the National, I think I probably could have been a little bit more like hemmed in a bit, maybe a bit more organized in the list that I put out there. But I think if you're going to err on one side, err on the side of being a little bit looser versus a little bit strict. Just because one thing at the National, even though I think it took me a little longer, and this will kind of come to my second point here in a minute, it took me a little longer to maybe like get my bearings and be like, all right, at this show, here's what I really want, or here's what I'm really looking for, because my list was a bit all over the place and not very kind of honed in. What that did allow me to do a bit at the National was look around and have eyes for things that I would not have maybe normally picked up. If my list had been too strict, I may well have missed it. And, these were things that I really wanted, but they were, very rare pieces that I wouldn't have thought to put on a list. So I think what's smart is to go in with some bit of organization, or else it gets very overwhelming because you're just all over the place, because you're going to see, 100, 200 things you want, right? You're going to see just a ton of stuff, right? Because we're collectors. We, and you and I both, our collections, each of us, our collections at times can have a little bit of ADD where we're like, this is what we do, but man, this looks cool over here as well. And when you go to a big show, you're going to see a lot of, oh, but this looks cool over here as well, right? So you're going to see a lot of that. And, it's okay to go down that road a little bit, and, dip your toe in something that seems like, it's neat or whatever. But you don't want to go too far down that road, or 2 months later, you're going to look at what you bought and be like, this makes no sense. This is not really in line with what I do. And, in my opinion, you'll probably lose interest in a chunk of it, because it was kind of an in the moment thing. So for me, kind of going into the National, this year, my thought is, okay, I want to focus on vintage boxing, and here's a couple vintage football cards that I'd really like to snag. I mean, I have kind of a list of priority cards, but also thinking kind of, especially within the vintage boxing category, thinking a bit loosely, because I know there's a lot of stuff out there that I am still learning about or don't know about. So being willing, if I see something cool, it's like, okay, I know I want, Peter Jackson cards. Here's a card I didn't expect to see. Let me kind of look into that, even though it's not like the one on my list or something like that. So I think being organized to a point, but not so hemmed in that your eyes aren't kind of, seeing potentially other things that would fit your collection.
All right. Well, I have a question. As you were speaking, I thought about this. You've been to the card shows with friends and fellow collectors, ones that you know, right?
Exactly.
So I guess my question is going to be, if there's a card that you're on the fence about and you're not really sure, and you kind of started with that, you're like, oh, I didn't really want to get that one, but I did end up getting it. I guess there's an element of FOMO in there, but because you know that it's there for a limited time, and there are so many collectors out there. Someone might snap it up before you can, and that's a big fear of mine as a collector. And sometimes I get a bit too greedy in that sense. I'm going to buy the card. Someone might want
100%.
it. So in that case, any thoughts on that, and how you would deal with a card? Let's say, for example, maybe it's slightly out of your price range, or it could be something that's, maybe a grade lower than you want, or it just doesn't have the eye appeal that you are after. Any ideas or thoughts on what you'd want to do with that?
Depends the card, right? Like, so the card that I ended up buying at the the Chicago Sports Spectacular was a 48 leaf Chuck Bednarik, which vintage football collectors will know. That is a scarce card, but it's not ultra rare as to where, if I pass on that because it's not the one I want, I can find another one on eBay probably later in the year, or find another one down the line somewhere. It's never going to come up again. Now, if you're looking at something, and again, when we get later into the show a bit, I'm going to show a card that fits this description exactly. If you're thinking about something that's a little bit more like ultra rare, where there's only like 10 or 15 copies of it out there, if it's a little bit higher than your budget, or it's not quite the grade you want, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, right? Because if you're not going to see another one anytime soon, and that's another tip that I'd have for bigger shows like this, if you can, because sometimes bigger shows are going to have those cards that, you wish you saw on eBay, or that you don't see on Heritage Auction or whatever very often, that ultra rare stuff, if you see those, I would prioritize getting those over some of the other things on your list, just because you don't know when you're going to see them again. So yeah, so basically what I'd say to that is, if something's not exactly what I wanted to show at this point, I'm okay passing if it's something I know I can pick up down the line. But if it's something where I don't think I'm going to see another one up for sale, quite literally, in the case of, again, one card I'm going to show today fits a lot of these, it's a real live example of some of the stuff I'm saying. If you're not going to see it for another year or two, you may just have to pay up, or, accept like, hey, maybe this isn't the perfect copy, but it's a copy, and it might be the only one I have a chance to get my hands on for a couple years.
Yeah, that's that takes me back to a guy called Iowa Dave. I don't know if you listened to the Shallow End, his show.
Oh,
He's a
yes, yes,
baseball
yes.
card collector.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
So
him. Yeah.
he basically said that. I mean, I don't know if you listened to the episode where he was talking about getting his Grail card, and I think that there has the same feel to it. It's like, this card doesn't come up very often. It's really rare. The price is there. He had this whole plan going into the show, but he just had to completely change it and say, no, this is the card that I want. And I think scarcity wins out over good deals in some ways. You're like, well, I'm never going to see this card again. I got to get it now.
Well, quite frankly, at larger shows, it's not really. I mean, there's exceptions to this. Like, I'll show another card that was an exception to this, where I did get a very good deal on it at the National. But by and large, it's not where you're going to get the best deals. A lot of times you get better deals through, hobby friends in Facebook groups, Instagram, even off eBay. But the biggest advantage of these big shows is you are going to see stuff that you don't see every day. You're going to see stuff that's more rare. And okay, even if it's a little bit pricier than maybe you were hoping it would be, it's there. You have a chance to get one. And to me, that's been my experience. The biggest advantage to going to a major show is you just have an opportunity to snag stuff that you would not otherwise have the opportunity to.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a little bit different to these shows that I've been to in New Zealand. It's at least the one down in Wellington. So down there, it was run by the New Zealand Card Society. They call themselves the Cardophilic Society. And so
that's a great name, by the way.
Yeah, card lovers. And so what they would do is they would get their members to be vendors. So you would find really great deals because they're like, I'm just a collector, I want to sell. So it feels like a Facebook interaction or a card friend interaction.
Larger shows will not feel like that.
Okay. It's good to know. And with those smaller shows, like, it's not even small, like it's 150 vendors. That's decent size, But you could find some really good deals and some really interesting rare cards too. Mm-hmm. So I think that might be my favorite flavor. But I do want to test out the waters with the bigger shows. I'm actually really looking forward to probably the most to trade night. So I'm going to take the cards that I guess that kind of fell into my lap that are expensive. I want to try and get rid of them and get cards that I want, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So I have like a 1-of-1 Damian Lillard Nebula card. So trying to package that with maybe another. I've got a John Wall 1-of-1 card that I'm just like, I ended up packing. John and I were opening up in a pack, and I got the John Wall 1-of-1. So awesome. So we've got a couple of cards here that are worth a couple of $100, but if I could hopefully put them together in a deal or sell one and then be able to use the money from that to find a card that I really want. That's what I really want to try and do, either in the trade night or maybe at the show. Is that a possibility at a big show? Like you walking around with a backpack going, this is a card that I want to trade. What do you guys want to do with it? Kind of thing.
You'll have a chance to do that at the show and at the trade nights. I mean, it depends the table. Like I found, and this probably works to your advantage that, because I mostly do vintage, but I do, dabble in a bit of modern as well, particularly with the football autos and then kind of the 90s football stuff. And a lot of times, a lot of times the dealers that are most willing to engage in the trades are going to be guys that deal in modern cards more so, I've found. Maybe that's just a me experience, but some of the vintage dealers are a little bit less interested in that sort of thing.
Okay.
But I found like a lot of the modern dealers are like, and I know that probably less so through myself and more so through when you talk about going to shows with people. Every one of the shows I've been to, I think except one I've gone to with my brother, and he does a lot of modern basketball in particular, and he's always trading with guys and stuff like that. So I've observed modern dealers being very amenable to that. Is to where vintage dealers are a little bit more like, nah, I'll trade you for cash. That'll work. So it's a little bit more of that sort of thing. But at the trade nights, that's where you'll find, I think that's the whole point of it, right? You're going to have opportunities to do that. And another cool thing with, like at the National and some of the other big shows, they have trade nights, and also, like other like post show gatherings. Like they have like a YouTube content creator gathering. They have, like we have a vintage football dinner at the National. And I mentioned that because to say one thing that I think is important in any sort of like post-show gathering is also like the networking, the hobby networking, just
I'm looking
making
forward
new
to that.
friends. And I think for
Yeah.
you, obviously having a YouTube channel, I mean, that's a, very good opportunity for you. But just in general, as somebody like me who's, doesn't have a channel but is in the hobby, it's a great opportunity to make new friends, new connections, because, as you know, sometimes that leads to, where you can get good deals and pick up more cards and have more avenues for that. The more people where you don't have to deal, on eBay and such. So I think that's a big thing with trade nights and the like as well, is just that networking opportunity.
Definitely. I'm curious to see what this show's going to be about. I have a feeling, since it's based in Germany, it's going to be mainly football, meaning soccer cards.
Soccer.
But maybe because of their vicinity to the UK, there could be some other sports like rugby, which would be incredible for me. We'll see. I mean, I think the London card show will be the one that I'll be eyeing up next. And I know they do that quarterly. And so we'll see. I mean, we've lined up the big show in Europe, but I think next year it could be the London card show, and then one day getting over to the National will be a goal. So those are, I think it's just, step by step, trying to make as many shows as we can, but it's fun. I love it.
It's in Chicago the next few years, so like I don't live there anymore, but I still have a whole lot of people there, so we can
Nice.
we can make sure we put you up if you come over one year, because that'd be a
All right.
blast.
All right. Well, we'll have to make sure that our stars align, and one that you're going to, I'll try and get along to, and that kind of thing. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, but definitely. And yeah, another thing I'd say too, just still kind of on the topic of big shows, is give yourself some time to look around and see the room. I think, this show being more the size of the Sports Spectacular, giving yourself maybe like 2-3 hours to walk the floor and see what's there. Obviously, if you see that one card that you're like, I came to get this is a good deal on it, this is a good copy, obviously, snag that and just enjoy, the museum the rest of the time at the show. But unless it's that one specific card, right, I recommend taking some time to look around and get a feel for what's where. Because if you pull the trigger on something too soon before you've seen everything that's out there, you might find yourself without a budget for something you wanted a little bit more. So I think that's really important. At the National, you need like a whole day to look around. Like really, like at the National, I think you need to go 3 days. Your first day is just, I'm looking around. And then your next 2 days are, okay, now I know where to go to make purchases.
Did you find on the last day, and talking about purchases, is it better to buy it later if you can handle it? Because I assume that sellers just kind of want to get rid of the product. It's a pretty layered question, I guess.
Yes and no. If you're looking at something, so if it's a card where you're like, man, if this came down in price, let's say, it's $100 card. If this came down in price to $80, I would take it, but I don't like it enough to buy it at 100. Absolutely wait on that till the last day, because the last day dealers are 100%, in my experience, ready to make more deals. But also the best stuff always goes first, right? So if you're there on the first day and you see something, okay, this is a big card, this is a card I know a lot of other collectors who, go after this stuff are going to be into. If you say, oh, but I'll try to wait till Sunday to get it, it's like, well, it probably won't be.
No chance. Yeah,
so,
that's right.
So
Right.
that's, it's a calculus, right? Like, how much do you want the card? If you really want it, try to make a deal now, because it's not going to be around potentially. If it's something where you're like, okay, if it's gone, fine, but if I can get it for $20-$30 less than I'd take it, then yeah, I'd say wait on that.
Nice. Good advice, man. Good advice. Hey, let's make a massive change of direction and just do a complete 180. You and I have been talking about this for a while. I'm looking forward to chatting about this. Let's go back to boxing cards, and I think you're going to be focusing mainly on vintage boxing.
Yeah.
When I think I'm going to be talking about, I guess it would be, there's one outlier, but mainly 90s, early 2000s boxing cards. Yeah. So let's just, I guess, set a platform up for that. You and I both come up with a list of 5 guys that we want to talk about, and it's kind of going to be like a countdown kind of thing, I assume. Yeah. And we'll talk about them and why we like them and why they're significant, and maybe just mention a few of their best cards that are available or ones that we feel are kind of iconic. So do you want to start us off with a vintage boxing card?
Let's do it.
All right.
So this is why I kept alluding to my vintage boxing pickups at the National. I was
Yeah.
trying to bring it all together a little bit. But yeah, so a lot of my guys might be, I think your guys are going to be mostly familiar to people. Some of my guys will, but a couple of them won't. I focused in with one exception, largely on kind of late 19th and early 20th century African American fighters who were
Awesome.
significant at that time for their achievements. One of which that falls in that category is very well known, but three other guys that I think, are worth mentioning here. And the first one of those guys is a guy named George Dixon. And here what I've got is his 1902 Ogden's card. George Dixon is an interesting guy. He was born in this area of Nova Scotia called Africaville, which was an area heavily populated by African immigrants in the Nova Scotia area. And the area of itself has an interesting history if people want to Google it. But George Dixon grew up there. He was a bantamweight fighter. He was like 5'3", 140 pounds or something. Um, and bantamweight fighter, small guy, this, that, and the other. This isn't adding up right now to why I'm mentioning this person. The reason I'm mentioning George Dixon is George Dixon is the first black man in to what we know in terms of history to hold a world's title in any sport. He won the bantamweight title in 1890. He actually kind of won it in 1888, but it wasn't recognized till 1890 when he beat a more prominent British fighter. But in June of 1890, that's when he was officially recognized as a bantamweight champion and became the first black man to ever hold a world sporting title. Which I think is really significant, right? Like, this is something to where when we talk about, historical milestones, that's a pretty big one for a guy that most people have probably never heard of. But that's what I like about George Dixon, and he's significant in that way for me because I think that's an important milestone. He was Canadian, so he's not actually the first African American to hold world's title in anything. That was a guy actually named Joe Gans, also in boxing, who I'm not mentioning today, but he just missed the cut. He would have been like number 6 if I would have had to bring somebody in. But George Dixon only has 2 Fighting Days cards. He has an 1890 Mayo Cup plug card, which is his rookie, which is very, very, very high up on my list of cards that I'd like to snag this year at the National, if I can find one. The pop on those with PSA is, I think, 8. So the odds of me finding one. There's one SGC graded one on eBay now. It's way up there in price, more so than I think it should be. But the pop for SGC is like 4. So it's like when there's only 12 of a card graded in the world, sellers can kind of try to set the new comp as they see fit. But the second one is this one that I just showed a minute ago. This is this 1902 Ogden's Cigarettes General Interest Series card. This is his other Fighting Days card. This is a British release. I love this card. I picked this up. This is one of the only eBay cards I usually get sniped. This time I was the sniper on it. Got it by like 20 cents or something. And I'm very glad to have it in this PSA 2.5. This card is super low pop as well. I think between PSA and SGC, the pop's like 16, I want to say. So this is another one that you're not going to see it pop up very often, especially in a nice looking grade like that. So that's my number 5, and that's why. But yeah, he only has even a couple other post Fighting Days cards from like 1910, but those are his only 2 Fighting Days cards. Or the one I have, and then his 1890 Mayo.
So I guess the question I wanted to ask, as I've done a little bit of research into this, is how big is the vintage boxing or boxing card collecting community? Because I really have almost no clue about it, and this is like the first I've really deep dived into it myself. Like I already have a boxing card, which I'll show later, but it's quite interesting to see that the guys that I was chasing after, there's some pretty hefty prices. I was like,
Yeah.
whoo.
Yeah. So it's not huge, but I would say 2 things. One, in my kind of observation and being in this for, about a year now, it seems like even in that time it's growing. Like the membership in my Vintage Boxing Facebook group is growing. I found it interesting that of all the interviews I've done on your channel, the one that got the most views was the Vintage Boxing video. So, and there have been
a lot of positive feedback, yeah.
Yeah, and that was very interesting to me. And then, you have some guys that are heavy hitters on YouTube, like Ryan Nolan comes to mind, or James from Elite Hunters, that they are into boxing cards, and they're starting to put out some more content on this stuff. So it's a small-ish community, but I think it's growing. And also the people that are in there, in my experience, they're devoted. like it's tough to get some of these really rare and more desirable cards because, even if there's only, maybe a handful of people going after them, they're going to go hard. They're going to go hard. You are going to have competition for some of these cards. So, but it's also, I will say this, because the community is a little bit smaller, it is very welcoming. Like I've been able to, connect with some of the, people in the community that are, like the bigger people or have the more well-known collections very easily, and they're very accessible,
Wow.
very willing to share knowledge. So it's been, just a very positive experience, kind of getting into this world a little bit.
So do they interact on Instagram, or do they use what's the other one I'm thinking of? Discord. Do they interact on? No idea on Discord. I
Maybe
guess.
you've reached like the cap in my technology knowledge. I'm probably gonna have to Google Discord later, to be honest. So insert joke here about the vintage collector who doesn't know how to use technology. So I guess I'm old at heart in multiple ways here, but we do a lot of interacting. There's a classic boxing Facebook group. Do a good amount of interacting on there. And, recently, actually, one of the kind of main guys in that group, a guy named Todd March, who has the best Jack Johnson collection I've ever seen, he kind of put something in that group to say, hey, people, if they have IG, maybe throw your Instagram on there so we can start having a bit more interaction on there. So that's another thing, that there is some activity for the vintage boxing folks as well on Instagram. And there's actually another guy who does a mix of kind of boxing and non-sports cards. His name's Tommy. He has a channel called Collector Not Hoarder, which is really cool and unique. He's on IG a lot. It's a really fun channel. Awesome. He's got a cool collection, and he's very active on Instagram. And he and I actually were, talking about, another guy I'm going to mention, Sam Langford, here a couple days ago. So, there is some active social media-ing. It's just not as large of a contingency as you'd see from even like vintage football or something like that, let alone like vintage baseball.
Great. So let me tell you my number 5. So my number 5 is, let's call him world famous in New Zealand. He's one of our best heavyweight boxers. His name is David Tourman. They used to nickname him the Tourminator. So it's pretty fun. Yeah. So David Tour was a Pacific Island boxer, kind of burst onto the scene at, I think, the 92 Barcelona Olympics. He got a bronze medal there. It felt like he got a little bit robbed on the point system, as you can be sometimes. But he had a really strong future ahead of him. And I think he did as well as his capacity would allow him to do. I really felt like he didn't really put out his best performance against Lennox Lewis. So he had one title shot, and it was against Lennox. And Lennox just kept his space and just basically accumulated points through the whole fight. Really smart fighter, whereas Tua should have just been going at him hammer and tongs from round 1. Mm-hmm. And the way I remember the fight is, and it's been years since I've seen it. It's been since the live event itself, actually. But basically, he was so unsure for the first 11 rounds.
Really?
And then in the final round, he started to just go for it. And it was like, well, finally, we're getting to see the guy who he's supposed to be. But he had a great boxing career. And if you look at his career highlights, he was excellent. So I don't have any cards to show personally because I haven't bought any, but I have done a lot of research and I have done a little bit of buying on ComC. So I bought his 1996 ringside boxing card, and I'll put a screenshot up for the people who are watching on YouTube. But it cost me $1.49.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
So that's great.
You cannot beat that. You can't beat
it. And I did ask John to do a little bit of research and using Card Ladder just to get some of their biggest card sales. David Tour's cards are not expensive at all. His most expensive card, by quite a long way, I think his second most expensive, is less than half the price. But it's the 1994 Browns Boxing signed rookie card of his. I think it also has the signature of his trainer Lou Duva at the time.
Oh, wow.
So you've got David Tour's order and Lou Duva's order on a single card. And it's this really kind of, I'll try and explain it to you. It's this classic old school boxing black and white photo, even though it's in the 90s. And it's got this nice brown border around it. And it's, it's Tour doing that classic boxing pose, he's getting ready to fight kind of thing. It's really cool. So that card sold in 2023 on eBay. I think it was set price for $150 US.
That's it.
That's it. That's it. That's
When
it.
that's his most expensive card, that's a fun avenue to go down, right? Because this is somebody who's meaningful to you because of their being from New Zealand, you having watched them fight, and
That's
for
right.
you to be able to pick up so many of their cards, what it sounds like are such low prices. I mean, that to me, just in general, is one of the best parts of the hobby, where you can just go get cards that mean something to you for pennies on the dollar.
So the other thing that this boxer is known for, actually, he was on a show called Wheel of Fortune. Do you remember Wheel of Fortune? You had to spin
Yeah,
a
that
wheel
up here in
and
the
guess it
U.S.
works.
We watched Wheel
Yeah,
of Fortune was like nightly TV in my house growing up.
that's
Yeah, all the
right.
time.
Yeah, yeah. So David Tua appeared on Wheel of Fortune at its heyday in the
Really?
mid '90s in New Zealand, which was probably 10 years after it was its heyday in the States, because we got everything very late. Anyway, David Tua's on there and he's spinning the wheel, and they're like, "All right, David, have a go." And he's spinning. He's like, "I'd like to buy a vowel, please." Sure. What vowel do you want? He goes, "Oh, for awesome."
Oh no, we did
Oh, for
not.
awesome. Yes, he just like stick to boxing, but we
Yep.
love him, man. He's amazing.
Okay, David, here's your first spin of the wheel.
Good one, David.
David Tua, Olympic bronze medalist at Barcelona. What an achievement that was. $180 to set you away, David.
Oh, for awesome.
Oh, a vowel. I'm sorry, no vowels.
So he understood what he said years later, because he was just a young kid when the show came out. And they mocked him for years with it. But instead of kind of like getting upset about it, he just kind of leaned into the mockery, and he says it all the time now because he loves it. He knows it's
That's hilarious.
his catchphrase. One other thing he said on that show, which didn't get any airtime, but I found hilarious as well, was he spun the wheel again and it landed on something. He's like, "Yeah, I'd like to buy another vowel, please." "All right, David. Can I have a P?" What?
Oh no.
But I love him, man. I love him to bits. Like, he's done so much for Pacific Island people,
That's awesome.
pushing forward our culture. And I think his influence has influenced our current world champion boxer in Joseph Parker, both from Samoan heritage. Parker's probably going to be fighting Alexander Usyk next.
Oh, nice.
Usyk is a beast, man. It's a tough fight. It's a tough fight. I mean, so Parker has been in Tyson Fury's camp a lot recently, and he's doing really well because he's got really good trainers behind him. He had this point in his career where he had lost about 2 or 3 fights in a row, and it was not looking good for him. But he basically reached out to Tyson Fury, and Tyson's like, "Look, come to our training camp, see how you do." And Joe was probably my number 6 on my list. He was really close to getting in, but there were just too many legendary boxers that I couldn't add him into my list. But if he beats Usyk, he might get in. But that is going to be a tough fight. Usyk is just a monster, man. Anyway, Joe, after going and working with Fury, has just had this kind of career renaissance where he's beating guys. Like, he beat Deontay Wilder, he beat Zhilei Zhang. His last fight was against the number 1 contender. To be fair, the number 1 contender wasn't training, and then he took the fight on last minute notice, and he beat him too. So he's on a really good run, and I think he deserves that shot at Usyk. So if the fight does happen, we'll see how they go, because obviously Dubois is waiting in the wings. Yeah. Dubois was the one who pulled out of the fight with Parker. So anyway, I'm just ranting on about a guy who I don't have any cards of.
One of the things I've learned from talking with you is just, I've looked into some of these guys, Parker and Tua, because you had mentioned them in our previous conversation. I didn't realize how big boxing was in New Zealand. Like, there's actually a scene. You guys have had some good fighters, and that's pretty cool, because that was something I didn't know.
Yeah, and some of those lower weight divisions, New Zealand has got some really good fighters. In fact, there's one Australian fighter who is Pacific Islander as well, who probably has been influenced by Mike Tyson. David Tua. Sorry, I get Mike Tyson and David Tua confused because their fighting styles so similar. Okay. Anyway, there's this boxer named Jay Opataya. I don't know if you've seen him, but if he somehow moves up to the heavyweights, him and Usyk would be an incredible fight, because Opataya is just this. He's a beast, and he's just so intimidating and scary and powerful, man. So if you get a minute, check out some of his fight highlights, because his last fight against a really good up and coming New Zealand fighter. He just butchered him, man.
Really?
And the Kiwi kid was good too. His name was Nikia. His first surname was, I think, it's David Nikia as well. And he went against this guy Opataya, and he knocked him out cold. It was incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. So another Pacific Island boxer who probably owes a lot to our founding father of Pacific boxing, David Tua. So that's why he's my number 5.
That's really cool, man. And that makes a ton of sense too.
Yeah. Anyway, what's your who's your number 4, buddy?
So number 4 is probably going to be one of 2 guys on the list that people are, I think, at least a good chunk of our audience is going to recognize the name. And that is this guy, Mr. John L. Sullivan. And I don't think you can have a list of, top vintage boxing cards or top, boxers of the late 19th, early 20th century without mentioning John O'Sullivan. In fact, there's probably an argument for him to be a little bit higher on this list. If we were just looking objectively, he'd probably come in number 2. But as with every list I do, I organize it based on how much I like them. So I've put him at number 4. But John O'Sullivan was really the first American sports star. I mean, when you think about the lineage of, sports heroes in America, it really starts with him in the late 1800s. He became bare knuckle boxing champion. I think it was 1882. And he held that title until the gloved era, when he became, in the early 20th century, he became the first glove champion as well. So he ran through, and he was the last bare knuckle boxing champion, and then he was the first gloved boxing champion. And he was, very well known, I think, in all sectors. Because boxing, again, when you think back to the late 19th century, boxing was really the predominant sport in the U.S. I mean, baseball really didn't start coming on and getting popularity until, sometime early 20th century, the teens, that sort of thing. But boxing was it, and John L. Sullivan was kind of that guy. And he has, as a result of being one of the more famous fighters of the era, he has quite a few cards that are significant. His rookie card is actually an 1882. I don't have this card. It's kind of an odd looking card. If you ever see it, it's 1882 E.B. Duvall card, where it shows almost like Sullivan being pictured as almost like a demon figure, like flying through the air and punching another fighter. Like, yeah, cool. It's cool. It's a very unique card. Collectors seem to be a little bit divided on it. It's the rookie, but it's not his most iconic card because it's probably a little bit too unusual for everybody to get behind it and say, okay, like, this is a card where aesthetically I really like it. I think it's cool looking. Am I eager to own it at the price tag I'd have to pay to get it? I mean, it's a 4-figure card, even in low grade. So, is that something that I'd want to go after at that price point? Probably not. He's got several other cool ones too. He's got from 1887. This is the one I just showed, is his most iconic card. This Allen and Ginter card. If you're looking for kind of the John L. Sullivan card, this is it. The reason I was able to afford this is because it's not a numerical grade. As you see, it's authentic minimum size not met, which I'm fine with because it still presents really well, and it's a chance to own a copy of, I think it's not the most rare boxing card, though it is relatively rare. I mean, I think it's in that, between SGC and PSA, it's in that, like 50-something pop count. So still scarce, but not as rare as, some of the other cards from that era. But there's an argument to be made that it's the most iconic boxing card, like, kind of in the way that, the 52 mantle is not the most rare vintage baseball card, but everybody knows what that looks like. Within the vintage boxing community, that's the card where, if you say you say John L. Sullivan's cards, that's the first one that most people would think of, is this Allen and Ginter. He also has an old judge card from 1888 that is also very, very cool. I think it's probably it seems a little bit cheaper than the Allen and Ginter, but still, kind of up there where you'll pay, to get in a 1 grade, you'll be around that probably like $500-600 mark. And he has several cards from smaller sets too. Like, I think there's another 1888 release Duke Cigarettes set where it's called like The History of Poor Boys, and it shows him with, like, on the background, it's like he's got his mustache up there kind of in a portrait mode, and on the bottom it shows like a picture of him hitting the heavy bag. So that's a pretty cool looking card, a little bit less known. And part of the problem, in terms of being able to go to comps and stuff on some of this stuff, it's just the sales don't happen frequently enough to be able to say, okay, this is definitively what you'd pay for this in this grade or that in that grade. With some of these cards, it's sort of like, even at a 50 pop, it's like, okay, I know what I paid for this one. I think for this one, it clocked in at like, I think 346 or something for the minimum size not met. Would the next authentic minimum size not met sell for that? I don't know. It just depends on who wants it and how high they're willing to go and, what the situation is. That was less than I expected to pay for that. So that was part of why I jumped on it. But yeah, I mean, John O'Sullivan again, like just, I don't think I could make this list and not include him just because of not what he meant to the sport of boxing, but also American sports. And there's a lot of books out there on him that have been written. He died pretty young because he, surprisingly was an indulgent personality, drank a lot, ate a lot.
I was going to say, lived a boxer's lifestyle.
He lived a boxer's life. He most certainly did. One black mark on John O'Sullivan for me and why I don't rank him a little bit higher is he did have a standing rule where he would not fight a black fighter. So as a result, another guy I'm going to show on here, among other fighters of the era that were, black fighters, didn't get a shot at the heavyweight title so long as Sullivan held it. He eventually lost the title to James J. Corbett. I think that was, I want to say, I actually, the exact year escapes me, late 19th century at some point. But yeah, at that time, the fight between Corbett and Sullivan, that's the only fight Sullivan ever lost. So he basically lost that fight, and that was it for his career. But yeah, he had a spectacular career. He was a spectacular fighter, very important historical personality in the sport. I also have another John O'Sullivan card here. This one's not very rare. It's from that Ogden set. It's
cool.
Similar to the one that I showed earlier of George Dixon, but it's still a very cool looking card. This one you can get pretty cheap. I mean, if you want this one in lower grade, you can get it for right around $100. So, anybody looking to get into, still from 1901, right? This is still a very cool, very old vintage card, but you can get into this in a pretty good looking copy for about $100. So that's a cheaper option. Not as iconic, not as rare, but certainly a cheaper option for somebody who's looking to get into a John O'Sullivan card that's still, very cool looking and very old.
Very cool, man. I obviously kind of half previewed your list, and it made sense that he's got to be in the top 5 of vintage boxing figures. He's so iconic. This is my personal list of boxers who I just love watching fight, and I guess love the show a little bit too. My number 4 is Tyson Fury.
Nice.
Obviously very modern, a lot of fun. The Gypsy King. And I kind of struggled, and I still don't really know what his rookie card is. So I started looking on databases and just seeing what was around. The earliest known card of his that I could find was this beautiful Topps Now card. And it was like the promo page of him and Wilder before their first fight. And that was from 2018.
Oh, wow.
So I'll put up a photo of it later on. But if you can imagine them both, basically their faces, the camera's below them, it's looking at them, and behind them it's this black and white picture in the darkness. It looks as though they're just going to have this big street brawl against one another, and they're just kind of both looking at the camera with fists up. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
What I did struggle to find with Fury was just like, what is his most iconic card? Like you talked about John O'Sullivan's most iconic card. Really easy to see, really easy to find. Mm-hmm. But with Fury, I couldn't find anything that really felt that was that iconic. One was a Leaf card, actually. It was from 2024. It's one of those booklet type ones, though. And that was number to 10, and that was $175 on ComC.
That seems low for him.
Yeah.
I would have guessed it would be more expensive.
Well, I think it's because he lost those last 2 fights to Usyk. If he had won those, those prices would not be there. On top of that, there's a 2020 Topps on Demand on ComC right now for $720 in a PSA 9. So that feels a little bit more normal for his price range. But his most expensive card is 4 figures. It's a BGS 9.5, 2020 Topps Now autograph card of Tyson Fury. Oh, wow. And it's not even a great card. It's just him sitting on that throne before. Remember when I think it was his second fight against Wilder, and he's winning, and he's got the crown on and stuff like that. That sold in 2022 at probably the height of his, boxing fame and popularity for $3,494. Yeah.
Wow.
So So that one versus like 700 and 175, like three and a bit grand, 3.5 grand is something. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, obviously, like those fans who like Fury, I like them for all of the banter that he has, the
yeah,
stuff that he does on social media, and then just the style of boxing that he kind of evolved into. So he was definitely this almost boxing purist with a great jab, kept his space, and he just was able to grind guys down until wins. And then when he changed trainer and he just turned into this guy who just was like super physical and just dropping
yeah.
bombs and just leaning on guys until they ran out of gas. It was a lot of fun, and those three Wilder fights were amazing. I thought the first one was incredible. I'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
A guy gets knocked out in round 12, and you can see the lights are out. He's gone, and then all of a sudden, I just go bing, and he wakes up, and he gets up, and then he wins the rest of the round. And he's just like, I don't care.
And that's why I thought Fury would be more expensive, because he has those moments. He has that personality. It's like, even though obviously he's had those two losses, like you said, to Usyk, but his personality, his persona, and some of those moments that he's had, I felt like would make the last card you mentioned, the big one, that with the 3,000 price tag, that surprised me actually less than you telling me that first one was 175.
That's right. So, and with him, like after that first fight, and then the second fight when he beats Wilder for the first time, like he knocks him out, and then he knocks him out in the third one as well. Like I thought the third fight was going to be a wash, but Wilder really came to fight. He was amazing in that fight. I think Wilder dropped in the first, Fury dropped in the fourth, Wilder dropped in the sixth. It was amazing. And then he kind of, I feel like he's probably just either too old or not as motivated, because I thought the Ngannou fight was a bit of a farce. He looked way out of shape. And with the Usyk ones, maybe just a step slow, because he was in the fight for a while in the first one, but he just couldn't keep it up because Usyk's just ridiculously
he's a monster.
conditioned, and he's a monster. He's real good. But Fury, I love watching him fight. I love watching his social media stuff. He's a lot of fun. So that's why he's my number 4.
Yeah, that's a good choice. That is in terms of modern boxers, I think, you have to put him on there, like for the reasons we talked about, just the personality.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a cool pick.
Nice one. Who you got next, bud?
So I got another guy, these next couple might be guys people are a little less familiar with, but so I mentioned that John L. Sullivan would not give a black man a shot at the heavyweight title. And the predominant contender of that time who, had he been given a shot, I think it would have been one heck of a fight with John L. Sullivan, was a guy named Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson was born in St. Croix in the West Indies, but fought most of his career in Australia. He was the Australian heavyweight champ. He was the world's colored heavyweight champ. He fought against a guy named Bob Fitzsimmons, and Bob Fitzsimmons would later become heavyweight champion. And Bob Fitzsimmons said that Peter Jackson was the best fighter he'd ever fought against. He was the best fighter he'd ever gone against. And this is a guy who was a heavyweight champion. This is a guy who had some big fights. And that's what he said of Peter Jackson. So, I mean, he was, very well known to be one of the best fighters in the world. He sought out John L. Sullivan. He sought out a title shot, but John L. Sullivan kind of held very firm that he would not give a title shot to a black man. Had he gotten one? I mean, I don't know. John L. Sullivan was obviously a heck of a fighter as well, but I think that would have been a fight where when you look back historically, it's like, man, that would have been one that I wish we had on record. I wish we could have, seen what the outcome would have been. But nonetheless, Peter Jackson had a fantastic career down in Australia, and he has some really, really, really cool cards. His rookie that I do not have, and all of these, I mean, when we get into the pop on these Peter Jackson cards, I mean, I think I have the one that's probably the highest pop, and it's at 18 across PSA and SGC last I checked. So, I mean, 18. with his major cards, I mean, these are not easy to come across. And I'll show the one I have here in a second. This is actually the one I did pick up at the National last year, even at the expense of, blowing my budget and everything like that, because I had to. I have not seen another one come up. So.
It was like what we talked about at the start of the episode, 100%. Right? You're just looking at it going, it's not coming around again. I've got to get it.
I did a double take when I saw it, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, his rookie card is 18. I mentioned the 1888 Old Judge set that John O'Sullivan has a card in there. That's where Peter Jackson's rookie card is. I've never seen one in person. I've seen pictures of them online, like on museum sites. Well, I would love to buy one at some point. I've never seen one in person. Now, his next memorable card is this one. and this is the 1890 Mayo Cup plug, Peter Jackson. This is the one I found at the National, and I actually had to do a double take and stopped when I saw it, because I did not intend to, I wasn't.
It wasn't even on your list. I guess you're like,
it wasn't
I'm
on
never
the list because I did not think I'd see it. I thought I was going to have to settle for some of Peter Jackson's like post-fighting days cards, like his 1910 Mecca card or something like that, which is cool. But I didn't think Peter Jackson's fighting days card was going to pop up. And sure enough, I saw this one. I did a double take, and I sat there. I talked to the guy. I worked a deal for this and one other card I'm going to show here in a minute. But this is a really cool looking 1.5. There's some writing. I don't know if you can see it on here. Yeah, somebody wrote on the back of it. That's why it's a 1.5. Or it'd probably be higher. I really don't care. Like, again, how many of these am I going to have a chance to buy? And it looks great on the front. And it's cool because in this Mayo Cup plug set, this 1890 Cup plug set, you have variants where the name's at the top, and you can see in this one the name's at the bottom. I didn't really know what that meant when I bought it, but I talked to some experts that had been around the vintage boxing scene a while, and they said this version's actually a bit more rare. So how many versions of this card with the name on bottom are out there? I have no idea. So not many is the answer. So I'm really glad I own that one. He has another extremely rare card too. So I showed a couple of these Ogdens from 1901, and these are a UK release, the Sullivan and the Dixon that I have. There was a Ogden set also released in 1901, but exclusively in Australia that Peter Jackson was in. And that is a super cool card. And even though it's, post-fighting days card, and I think it may have even been released either right around the time he passed or, just before or just after, something to that effect. He wasn't fighting anymore. But this card is really cool looking. It's Peter Jackson's on there giving kind of a pose like this.
Nice.
And those Ogden's cards are cool anyway. It looks the same as those, but it was just released in Australia. And I don't know what the pop is on that, but that's another one that is exceptionally rare. Again, I've never seen one in person. I know a friend of mine, paid like $500 for one that quite literally has the corner cut off. In the upper right side. It only has 3 corners. And he paid $500 for it because he's like, I have one. So that's,
Yeah.
But that's awesome. So Peter Jackson's card, because he is somebody that kind of within the vintage boxing hobby, he might be forgotten in a lot of other circles, but he's, fairly well remembered in vintage boxing. So when his cards come up, people try to get them. And I was lucky to get this one. So that's my guy. That's my number 3.
With that kind of rarity, it really doesn't care. You really don't care about condition, do you?
Not one bit. You can't.
Not one, but no, you can't. There's no other option.
Yeah.
Wow, very cool. Very cool. Well, my third choice is not a heavyweight. He's from the Philippines. And as soon as you say that, everybody knows who he is. So it's Pac-Man. It's Manny Pacquiao. And I looked, again, I started my research by just going on to ComC to see what was around. There's a 2011 Allen and Ginter, number 262, and it's $20. Cheap, really cheap. It's not his most expensive card, though, not by a long shot. Manny Pacquiao's most expensive card is a 1999 World Boxing Magazine, and it's a hand-cut card.
Oh, wow.
And there was a PSA 10. It's sold on Fanatics Premier Auctions in 2021 for $22,800.
$22,000, not $2,200. $22,000.
$22,800. So Pac-Man's cards in general, like that was comfortably the highest, but there are a couple in the 5 figures, like 18,000, 13,000, 10,000. So that were the top 4 sales. Was basically 20, 22, almost 23, 18, 13, and then 10.
Those are high end, like Ali, Jack Johnson type prices.
It's because of the Philippines. The Filipino collecting community are crazy about cards.
Didn't you?
And he's iconic. Yeah, we didn't talk about Pac-Man in particular.
No, but
we talked about his ridiculous basketball cards there. They've got some of the best basketball cards in the world. So it makes sense that their guy is going for that kind of money. But you can pick up an Allen and Ginter card of his for $20.
Wow.
But Pac-Man was amazing. I loved watching him fight. He had so much energy. He was bouncing around the ring, and he just never stopped. From round 1 to round 12, he was just always on the move and attacking. The one kind of fighter that he struggled with, though, was the guy who would counterpunch. So when he'd go in, if a guy could have a good counter and hit him, he really struggled with those guys. And that's why he ended up losing to, do you remember those Manuel Marquez fights that he had? So he fought him 3 times.
Yeah.
Manuel Marquez was just this tough, gritty dude who didn't have much flavor to him, but man, he had guts. And he just had and he had hard hands too. You could tell, like, Pac-Man was going hard at him. And I remember in their first fight, he knocked him down like 2 or 3 times in the first round. It must have been twice, because three times knocked down in a round and you're done, right? So I think he knocked him down twice in the first and maybe once in the second. And it looked like the fight was over, but he just kept hanging in there because he's just tough and he never gives up. And by the end of the fight, it looked like he was winning. And it's like, whoa, let's do this again. And they did. Yeah. And it was awesome. And then the third time, it was amazing too, because Marquez knocked him out cold. It was amazing. But that was the one fighter he really struggled with. Like, when he fought pretty much everybody else, like, I remember his knockout of Ricky Hatton. Hatton is just basically on the floor doing the balloon pose, and the eyes are wide open, but there's no one home. And
it's always a little better than I thought.
Hatton down again.
And that
he might be out this time. That's it. Ricky Hatton is done. Knocked out in the second round by Manny Pacquiao. Is there any question that he is the best fighter in the world right now?
And his demolition of De La Hoya, who was an old fighter, to be fair.
But he was still.
But De La Hoya was old. He was like 3 years past his prime. And Pac-Man just took him apart, so much so that I think it was around 8. De La Hoya's kind of just threw in the towel. Like, look, dude, just don't take any more beating.
I remember that fight, because that was, I mean, just by virtue of name recognition, that was a big fight at the time.
It's all over. The fight is stopped. It's all over. De La Hoya can't answer the bell for the 9th round.
Yeah, he totally dominated him. Yeah, obviously, I was hoping that Pac-Man would fight Mayweather earlier. Mayweather's an excellent boxer too, but I just didn't find him as much fun to watch.
He's boring.
Pac-Man, he's boring, but a great boxer, like great defensive boxer.
Very defensive, but yeah, he just wasn't exciting.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, whereas Pac-Man was just on the move, and he changed weight class year after year, so he was fighting all sorts of boxers from all sorts of different weight classes, and even he lasted to like his early mid 40s, and he ended up beating some of these big contenders when he's 40 years old too. So, yeah, Pac-Man is on my list for a lot of reasons. He's a real showstopper. He was real quality boxer to watch.
Yeah, I think he's one of the more memorable modern fighters for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, he's there. So yeah, that's a good choice.
Thanks, man. Who you got next?
So next, we've got a guy who ESPN, when they ranked the top fighters of all time a few years back, ranked as their number 10 fighter of all time. And he is, I won't say unanimously, but at least widely considered to be the best fighter who did not win a title. And that is Sam Langford. This is another guy who was very active in the early 20th century, another African-American fighter. Well, he was actually born in Canada, but, carried out his career here in the United States. Sam Langford had, fights against guys like Joe Gans, where he, I think he fought Gans a handful of times. He won some, lost some. There were some draws. He fought Jack Johnson once before Jack Johnson was the heavyweight champ. And once Jack Johnson, he gave Jack Johnson all he could handle, by the way. It was a great fight, very tough fight. Jack Johnson won, but it was a tough fight. Once Jack Johnson got the heavyweight title, he would not give Langford another shot. He actually wouldn't give several of the top African-American fighters of the day a shot. Johnson's rationale, which may have been partially true, was that, he wouldn't get, not as many people would be interested in watching two black fighters fight against each other. Therefore, he wouldn't get paid as much. I believe that may have had something to do with it, but also probably no coincidence that guys like Sam Langford, Joe Jeanette, these would have been great challenges for Jack Johnson as well. So there may have been some self-interest in keeping the title longer present there. But either way, a Johnson-Langford title fight would have been, again, another one of those fights that I wish we had on record, because Langford was a great fighter. He was another in the heavyweight division, and he'd fight anybody, anytime, anywhere. He was known for that. He'd beg people to fight him. He would go around begging for fights. He'd step in the ring with anybody and everybody. Very, very tough fighter. Paid for that later in life. He went blind after his fighting days. at several years before his death. So he lived out a good chunk of his later life, blind in both eyes. But, from what I've read, he was still somebody that stayed in pretty good spirits and everything like that. But definitely, his, tendency to take a lot of bouts, and, bouts back then would go, 20 some rounds,
Exactly.
just ridiculous lengths of time. But he was as good as they came. Had he got a shot at Johnson when Johnson was the heavyweight champ, at the very least, we can say it would have been a fantastic fight. He has a whole lot of really great cards, and I'm going to show some of them. But I think the one that if you could say, hey, this is the Sam Langford card I want, it'd be the 1910 Red Sun Sam Langford, which I think there's, 5 in existence or something like that. One actually just sold recently on Heritage Auction, and it went for, I want to say like 2,700 or something like that. It was in a 1 grade, but it doesn't matter. This was a regional release in Louisiana. And, in the set, right, we're talking about Louisiana in 1910. So obviously, racism was alive and well. There were 4 black fighters in the set: Sam Langford, Jack Johnson, Joe Gans, and Joe Jeanette. And all of those guys were short printed, and their cards were pretty scarce. So I don't know if that was racially motivated or not. I know I've heard people posit that it may well have been. I'm not sure. But either way, very scarce and almost non-existent. So not one I have, but I do have some other Sam Langford cards I like a whole lot. This is one of my favorites that I got at the National this year.
Yeah.
This 1911 Turkey Red, which is gigantic. Sent this off, got a 1. It looks pretty good on the front. It's got some, this was obviously in a scrapbook or on somebody's wall or something, because it's got the stains on the back. I don't care. Looks great. I think this is a cool card. My personal favorite Sam Langford card I own is one I just got earlier this year, bought it raw and sent it off to SGC, and very happy with the look of it. This is the 1910 Philadelphia Caramel Sam Langford. I love this set. This may well be my favorite vintage boxing set. I mean, I just think these are great looking cards, and the Langford's one of my favorites. Yeah, great color. This one's pretty well centered too. There's a little bit of a crease down at the bottom of, what is it? Yeah, this corner right here, but I mean, I think it's a great looking card. That's my favorite Langford card. Langford's rookie card is right here, and that is the 1909 Ogdens. Another famous rookie card in that set I'm going to show here in a minute, but that's the Langford rookie. I like that too. And let me tell you, when it comes to affordable Langford cards, his rookie, right, one of the best fighters of all time, I got this in an SGC 4.5 for $56.
Wow.
$56.
Wow.
And if you want a cheaper one yet, I got this for $30. This is the T218 Langford and a PSA 3. These T218s are fun. If you're looking to get involved in, early 20th century vintage boxing and pick up some cards at great value, these T218s are great if you go for the Mecca or Hassan backs, meaning, see, I have the Mecca back right there. You can see it. There's different backs to these, some more scarce than others. Mecca and Hassan are both pretty common, and you can pick them up pretty cheap. If you get into like Tolstoy's or something like that, they go up in price. But I mean, beautiful cards and very affordable. And this is another
awesome cards,
great Langford card. So yeah,
those
Sam
are
Langford,
awesome.
that's my guy.
Those are works of art, man. They're just beautiful. They're just beautiful, and the colors still pop after that many years. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I love those. Yeah, these early tobacco boxing cards are just, really fun way to get into some more rare and historical stuff. And yeah, like you said, I think they're beautiful. I
agree with you. I completely agree with that. So my number 2 might be the most iconic boxer of all time. He's probably not. He's probably number 2, which is why he's my number 2. And he's this guy here. It's Iron Mike Tyson.
Iron Mike.
He's I
the
love
most iconic boxer of our lifetimes.
That's right. That's right. And he was the guy who basically got me into boxing. So my dad would show me old boxing videos, and we'd love watching those fights. And I remember one time we actually watched a live fight when I was just a youngster, and it was Tommy the Hitman Hearns versus Sugar Ray Leonard, and just watching them as masters of their craft kind of piqued my interest, let's say. But when you saw Mike Tyson fight against guys and just explode in 2 rounds and just completely destroy them, like I clearly remember the Spinks fight where Spinks was just so frightened to even get into the ring, and you knew before that bell rung, he was done. He was done.
Taking them, the uppercut, body shot, down goes Mike Spinks for the first time. The count is up to 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. That was a body shot that took him down. Here comes Mike Spinks in. He leads to the right hand. Down he goes. I don't think he'll get up from this. Mike Spinks is laying flat on his back. The count is up to 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. He won't be able to do it. It's all over. Mike Tyson has won it. Spinks almost fell back through. A dramatic first round knockout for Mike Tyson.
Tyson was going to beat him. He was just rolling over everyone. And the Trevor Berbick one as well, when he gave him the kidney punch and Berbick was still trying to stand up and he's wandering all over the ring.
One of the youngest heavyweight champions of all time. Bangs the body. Wow, that uppercut is Tyson. Catches him with a leg left hook, and he goes down. He goes down. He should be able to get up from this. His legs may be shut. They are. As Trevor Berbick falls back in the rope, I don't know if he's going to be able to continue. He's got the heart, but his body won't let him do what his mind wants to. And he's counted out. It'll be scored as a...
It's like, this guy's something else. And he had so many iconic fights. He was great to watch.
He may not have been the best fighter ever, but he was the scariest. He was the most intimidating man, I think, to ever step in that ring. It was, at least that we've ever seen. Right. But man, like
at least pre-prison, let's say, right?
Yeah, of course.
At least pre-prison, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, after prison is a different guy, but and then he made his money and he tried his best in some ways, but I think that edge just kind of disappeared after prison.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read his story, but it's incredible. I think it's called Undisputed. I think that's the title. It's just Undisputed Champ or something like that.
I haven't.
But his autobiography is unbelievable. If you look at the guy today and the self-awareness that he's been able to develop. So Spike Lee was the guy who ended up reading this autobiography, loved it so much. And he's like, Mike, let's do a Broadway show with you. And all they did was they put up this big red curtain behind him, and they just got Mike Tyson on stage just talking about his life.
I heard that.
And it was amazing. Cool. It was amazing. And just to see the evolution of the guy from the guy who went to prison, who was obviously too young and didn't really didn't have good people around him, to a guy after prison who was just angry at the rest of the world and didn't know how to manage himself, to this person now who's gone through so much more than I could even imagine going through. Like the loss of his daughter, I think, was the final thing that really kind of, I think, gave him that final sense of self-awareness. And he's just been so much fun to watch him evolve as a human as well. So I had to get an Iron Mike card. That's anyway, awesome. He has a lot of quite expensive cards. You're the one who told me about his rookie card, actually. And in fact, it's a sticker. So it's that 1986 Panini Supersport sticker. It's actually not the most expensive card of his.
Really?
If you can believe it. No.
I didn't know that.
So his most expensive card is a 2013 Upper Deck PMG Purple, which sold the PSA 9, which sold on Golden for $58,800.
Holy cow.
Holy, I was blown away when I heard those numbers.
That's unbelievable.
Like, you are kidding. And I want to go through his top 5 sales, because I think it speaks a lot to these auction houses and how much more hype they can create in a market than simply an eBay sale. So Mike Tyson's top 5 card sales are all through auction houses.
Wow.
The number 2 sale of his card is also through Golden. It's a BGS 9.5 off his rookie card.
Wow.
That was in 2021, and that sold for $48,800.
I do recall. I wouldn't have got it exactly right, but I knew it was in that close to like $40,000-$50,000 ballpark. I remember that.
Literally, about a month after that one, in Golden again, in 2021, a PSA 9, so not 9.5 or 9, PSA 9 sold for $31,200. That's a PSA 9. That's not even a 10. Can you imagine what a 10 would go for? That's nuts. And also later in 2021, Golden sold another one, also PSA 9, for $28,800. But it just shows you the power of these auction houses.
Yeah.
Because you could probably buy that card in person at a card show or at on eBay or somewhere else for a much lower price. But these ones, they must just know some big dogs who have really, really deep pockets who just kind of want the prestige of winning the card. I was blown away by the PMG one though, because that's numbered to
me too.
125.
Yeah.
125 cards of that,
Yeah,
and that's the purple. That's not even the top one.
No, that surprises me. The rookie card's a little bit less so, those sales, but
yeah,
that PMG surprises me a great deal. I would not have guessed that.
Because was that rookie card? Was that Panini Italy, or was that? It might have been, right. 1986.
I think it was. Yes, I'm almost certain it was. Yeah.
So again, there's a sense of rarity there and a sense of uniqueness as well. So Iron Mike, man, he's not cheap, that's for sure.
No, but there's a reason he's an icon. You're paying for what you get, right? You got the iconic guy, iconic fighter. I mean, iconic pop culture figure, really. So yeah,
100%.
His prices will stay high, would be my guess.
Which is why I think you've been dropping hints about who's going to be number one of yours, but I don't want to be a spoiler, man. Who's your number one?
It is the obvious choice if you're talking about early 20th century fighters, and I got a whole lot of cards of him to show here, and that is Mr. Jack Johnson. And to me, and I made this argument randomly to somebody who, quite frankly, didn't care the other day. I don't know how I got on the topic, but I do that sometimes. I'm a rambler, so I was making the argument that if you're talking about most historically important sports figures in American history, I think it has to be either Jack Johnson or Jackie Robinson. I think that you can make an argument for either one of those two guys, but I think those are the two guys you're debating between. I think obviously you have other guys that are very important down the line, but those two guys are foundational if we're going to talk about, kind of anybody else that comes later. And, Jack Johnson, I'm not going to talk about him quite as much because I know I have before in other episodes, but he was the first black heavyweight champion, won the title in 1908 from a guy named Tommy Burns. And that's a good opportunity for me to show a card here from the 1910 Philadelphia Caramel set.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, this is new from the last time we talked. This one is a fabulous example of a PSA 1. The front is amazing. There's some paper loss on the back. Again, don't care. But this commemorates the fight between Johnson and Burns. This is 2 years later in the Philadelphia Caramel set. I love this card. I was thrilled to purchase this card, and I'm glad I own it because to me, this is the most historically significant fight of all time. Maybe 1A, 1B with the Jim Jeffries Jack Johnson fight in 1910. But I am very happy to own this card. So he won the title in 1908, had his big fight of the century with Jim Jeffries in 1910 when Jim Jeffries was a prior champ who had, lost the title via retirement. And so, there was a big push from the white community in America to get Jeffries out of retirement to fight Jack Johnson. Because the sense was, a lot of white America at that time could justify not calling Jack Johnson the champion because he'd never beaten Jim Jeffries because Jim Jeffries had retired. So Jeffries, he was like 300 pounds or something. It took him a good, almost a year to get in shape, I want to say, to get down to the point where he could get in the ring with Johnson. But it wasn't a particularly close fight. Johnson won the fight. He beat Jeffries. And after that, race riots broke out in, various cities in America. I mean, it was a really big deal because, again, going back to context, right, boxing was the American sport at that time. We still hadn't quite crossed over to when baseball was going to take over a few years later. But having Jack Johnson, a black man, hold that title was very unsettling for a lot of people. And there's a great documentary. I've mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. Unforgivable Blackness on PBS, which kind of goes into Jack Johnson's life, how he was very outspoken, very brash, married white women, said what he wanted.
Did things his way, man. Did things his way.
He would not be told what to do. That eventually got him in a position where he was wanted here in the United States. He left the country for a few years, eventually came back, did the prison time in the U.S., but lost a good chunk of his fighting days to, having to be out of the country and having to do prison time. So who knows, what other title defenses he could have had in that time. He eventually lost the title in a fight in Havana, Cuba in 1915 to a guy named Jess Willard, who, I think by that time, Johnson wasn't peak Jack Johnson. Also, if you watch the documentary, he probably didn't train as well as he should have for the fight. Maybe took Willard a bit lightly, but nevertheless, lost the fight, lost the title. But that does not diminish his incredible importance in American history as the first black heavyweight champion and really as the first black sports star. in our country's history. So I think that's a very important person to note. And I've got a lot of cards here to show. I showed the Burns.
Show us, man. I could see those cards all day long. Yeah.
We got the rookie card. This is his rookie card. It's not so. This is probably his most recognizable card, I would say. Is it his most desirable or rare? No. I mean, this is one where you have, pop of over 100, so it's not super rare. But it is the one. It's his rookie, very recognizable, probably his most recognizable card. It's kind of similar to Langford. I mean, there's a lot of cards you could choose for Johnson in terms of it being like, the most desired Jack Johnson card. But I think for me, I would say it's again from that Red Sun set. If I could ever get my hands on a Red Sun Jack Johnson, that would be incredible. I don't think one is sold in like 5 years or something. And when it did, it was, I don't remember. It was over, over like 20 grand or something like that. So, it's not a card I'll ever own, and they never come up anyway. So, it's, but to me, it would be an incredible card to have, but, I do have some other ones here. Another one that, I think might be, another one of the ones I like most aesthetically is this. Again, from that Philadelphia Caramel set, which I've showed a couple cards from now. This is another one I got at the National, and this is one I actually got a good deal on. Got it from a really cool dealer there. He had it priced, I want to say, at $265, and it was one of those things where I was like, I got to try to be cool here to negotiate because I know if he says I'm not budging, I'm buying that thing at $265. But I was able to get him down to $235, and that was the card that, some of the other boxing guys that saw that one at the show, that was the one where they were like, that's the one that they wanted to get their hands on. So pretty cool. Here is Jack Johnson's, to my knowledge, first American release card. That's his 1910 E75 American caramel card. This one has a little bit of paper loss at the bottom, but the picture of him's pretty cool. So, I got a decent deal on it, so I went for it. But that's his American rookie, so to speak. Another card that I really like. And then these next two, we got a couple 218s with mecha backs. There's the 218 front view.
They're so cool.
T218, sorry. Yeah, there's the T218 front view, which I think that one's a really cool card. Got that one in a 1. And then this is the T218 side view. And this is the first boxing card I ever purchased last year. And this is a phenomenal entry-level Jack Johnson because you can pick that up in a 1 for, sometimes even slightly less than $100, but all day right around that $100 mark. And it's a great-looking card. Again, they're talking about it being one of the, if you're going after the common backs, like again, this is a mecha back, so it's not super rare, but man, if you're just looking to get a really cool early Jack Johnson card, this is the one that I would point you in the direction of because it is very affordable and very great, cool looking card. But Jack Johnson's my number 1. I figure that's who it has to be.
Very good. Very good. No arguments, man. But I'm pretty sure that I think even listeners will be able to guess what my number 1's going to be if Mike Tyson is my number 2. It's the wonderful Muhammad Ali. Like, talking about icons, like boxing pretty much has those 3 guys, really, right?
Yeah, I would say we've covered the big 3. I agree.
Yeah, it's probably Tyson. I think Johnson, just because of how long ago his career was. I think
he's certainly less well known than the other 2.
I think that you'd have to say that Muhammad Ali would still probably be the most well known out of all 3 of them.
100%.
And speaking about beautiful documentaries, how good was the When We Were Kings documentary?
Yes,
I just love it
fantastic.
So much.
Highly recommend.
Like, it's probably the first of that kind of documentary, and you get to see behind the scenes with the guy and the fears that he had facing George Foreman, the responsibility he had as a black man in Africa. How he was able to kind of manipulate the crowd with the Ali Boumaier call. Yep. Just so much about the guy that you got to see the guy behind the scenes really raw, and he was this really thoughtful, and as we all well know, obviously a really thoughtful person who was just more than a fighter. He was bigger than boxing in many ways. Like, you talk about a black man who's changed the world. Like, he's right up there. He's right up there. Think about what he did with the Vietnam War. Unbelievable.
And
He does that kind of thing.
Ali was arguably more impactful than Johnson in a lot of ways. My thinking for Johnson, though, is there is no Muhammad Ali without Jack Johnson.
That's right.
That's what I go back to, because Ali sort of, when he was obviously fighting. We had more media. He had more ways of, getting himself out there. And he had, he wasn't always well liked, but there were more people who were in his corner from white America at that time than there were Johnson.
That's right.
But I just go back to without Johnson, I don't know if we get Ali.
That's right. Without Johnson, without Joe Louis.
Joe Louis
is a massive influence on Ali too. I've heard stories that when Joe Louis would watch Muhammad Ali train, Joe Louis was Ali would almost stop in the middle of the fight, go over and welcome him and say, "How you doing, champ?" That kind of stuff. Like he knew where it came from, and he respected all of the people that had gone ahead of him. And Ali was just this beautiful soul who was just an artist as a boxer. I mean,
yeah.
You watch some of his iconic fights, the Sonny Liston fight, the Joe Frazier fights. Oh my God,
those
they were vicious. Just vicious. Just you're watching them, and after a while, you're like, I don't know if I can watch this beatdown of this guy anymore. Like Joe Frazier just hated Muhammad Ali so much, he would not go down against him, and he just got beat up, man. It's like, dude, what are you up to? And Ali he couldn't manage it. He's like, this guy, he just keeps coming, and then. Because you'd have Joe Frazier kind of wandering in like this, and Ali just tap, and then it took him like 10 rounds to kind of get him back. But in the meantime, Frazier would make some big shots against him, and Ali could take them.
Frazier really hated him. Frazier really hated him. I remember when I was a kid in the 90s, there was a Sports Illustrated cover that said, "The fight's over, Joe." And inside there was an article talking about Joe Frazier and how he needed to let it go with Ali. And it told a story of there was a time where it was a kid maybe or something came up to Joe Frazier and got an autograph. And he's like, "You fought Muhammad Ali, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I did 3 times." And he's like, "Oh, did you win?" He's like, "I won once, he won twice." And Frazier said something like, "But look at him now and tell me who really won." It's like,
wow,
easy, dude.
Wow. Yeah, but that's what made those. That's what made those fights so iconic. Like the Thriller in Manila, it was just a beating. Or the one in Madison Square Garden, it was just like when Ali broke his jaw and he was doing we didn't know if it was, no one ever knows. Was he faking being kind of, tipsy? And because Frazier just wouldn't go in. I think he didn't want to get caught out. There were so many great moments with those two. And even like the fights against Ken Norton and other fighters, he had this really iconic career. And just, I couldn't remember there was one black fighter that he fought, and he kind of disrespected Ali before the fight, and he said, "I'm never going to call this guy Ali. His mama named him Clay. I'm gonna call him Clay." So I get into the fight, and Ali just like pop, and by the 7th or 8th round, he's like, "What's my name? What's my name?"
Yep.
Incredible.
I don't remember who that was against, but I remember that story.
Yeah, no me. So so with him and his cards, you were the one who told me about his 1960 Hemmett's Journal boxing card. A PSA 1.5 sells for around $1,000. A PSA 6 I've seen online for about $4,200. But his most expensive, weirdly, online, was an SGC 7. And that sold for $11,400. And that's the most expensive one that we could find, which I find strange. But I guess there must be a lot of these Hemmett's cards. I've seen 8s out there for sale on eBay. I've seen 8s out there on eBay. So I wonder what you can pick up an 8 for.
I mean, that's one that I've bid on a few lower grade ones in the past year. I mean, you can find them. So yeah, I think scarcity plays a role in the fact, or rather kind of lack thereof, at least relatively speaking, in the fact that you can still get those for a fairly affordable price. I mean, relatively speaking, right? That's still a lot of money, $11,000 to pay for a card. Of course. Considering the athlete and the grade on that, I mean, that's it's still pretty affordable in lower grade. You can get one for a few $100.
Considering the Tyson card, man,
exactly,
$58,000 for a numbered to 125.
I don't get that one. I don't get.
Yeah, but I think that's just really good marketing and an auction house having a bunch of deep-pocketed people. Anyway, so Ali is my number one, man. So yeah, I guess we've covered 10 really iconic boxes from, I guess, 2 different eras. Like I went from modern all the way back to Ali in the 60s.
Yeah, I think what have we covered
So
here
good
from like
board.
the 1880s to present almost. So, but that's cool, man. I loved it when you had this idea for that very reason, because I think in some ways we just, at least, to some extent told kind of the history of the sport a little bit in terms of a lot of these guys. But I thought, yeah, that was cool.
I agree with you. And I think on top of that, what I've noticed is that there are some really expensive guys like Manny. You're not going to be able to get a cheap rookie card of his. Well, you might be able to if you're lucky, actually. I've looked and there are some better prices in the top sales. I think it's hard to find an iconic Fury card, but I think in general, boxing cards are just really tough to come by. They don't really make them.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why.
And that's kind of the deal, even with the vintage stuff, or at least some of it, right? It's like, there's cards of fighters that are reasonably affordable, but you just have to wait for one to come up. That's been one of the things I've learned in vintage boxing is patience, because there's a lot of cards on my list that at this point I'm just, I'm hoping maybe I see them at the National or something, but yeah, just not as frequently up there, not as readily available, which is kind of part of the fun though, in some ways.
Yeah, it makes you value them more.
Exactly.
You're like, I'm not going to see this card again if I don't try and get it now.
And the rush you get when you find it is all the more as well, because it's, it's something you're not going to see every day.
Yeah, I get that with rugby cards, man. Hey, this has been a lot of fun. But before we go, I'll say that if you do have any cards on your list, let me add them to mine in Germany. You never know. There could be a vintage boxing guy around. So we'll talk about that maybe after we leave. But that sounds like a plan, man.
Yeah, man, 100%. Thanks for having me on again, man. Well, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a good time too, bro. All right. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. Take care.
See ya.